Hi, I'm Kimberly Lane.
I'm Tom Henschel.
I'm Sonia Jante. Together, we are Unlocking Leadership. We are three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take a question from a real client and provide key insights to address their challenge from our three different perspectives. It's a holistic approach to understand challenges and opportunity. So let's get to it. Our question today is from Erin in Charlotte. Are there steps I can take in my career that will keep me on the success track? Are they different for women? Kimberly, what would you recommend to Aaron?
Oh, great question. I love it. Love it. Aaron, I'm going to assume because when you wrote in and you signed off your email, it was AARON. So I'm going to make an assumption you are male. And so thank you for your question. I also like the fact that you're also asking on behalf of your female colleagues or sisters who are in a career as well. So great, holistic thinking. So, how would you define success? Is probably my first question. Everybody defines success differently. So, first, you'd want to understand, how are you defining success? Is it keeping your job? Is it getting promoted every 2 years? Is it reaching a VP or a senior vice president position? Is it making more money? What is that success? And be very clear on how you're defining that success so that you can put a plan in place to get there. I always like to talk to my clients too. If you're trying to achieve this goal here, you're trying to be a C-suite or senior vice president, you're trying to make a monetary income goal, you want to work backwards, right? So what skill sets or disciplines dominate that role? Or in order to make, XYZ in money, what needs to change from what you're doing now? What do you have to do differently or be differently or lead differently or show up? Do you need to work longer hours if you're trying to make more money? Do you need to make more sales? And what does that look like? Or if you're trying to be a CEO, what skill sets do you need in that position? Do you need to be more of a strategic thinker? Do you need to be more of a team player and collaborating? Do you need to be speaking out more within meetings? Do you need to be more visible around the office? Do you need to be having more conversations with those around you? So, it's really important to know what you're trying to reach for, you can define that specific goal very clearly. So you know what you need to work on in order to bridge the gap to get there. The third piece I'd suggest is, meet with your superior and communicate and put together a plan that works for that success track. Again, you know what your goal is, you know what you need to create or be or become or learn. Let's put a plan in place to get you there. And then finally, the last part I would say, be vocal about where you're trying to go. Once you decide where you want to go, you need to start self-promoting, especially for women. I think this is a deal that I think we've had an episode in the past where, women tend to be less vocal about their accomplishments and where they want to go. They assume that because they're doing a great job, it will naturally occur. But you really have to be, especially in this competitive environment, be very self-promoting about one, what you want to achieve, what skill sets you have, and demonstrate those skill sets and talk to your peers and just peers about what your next step is. I will start there and pass it over.
What do you got?
So Tom looks at me, so I'm like, okay, I guess I go next.
Yeah, I'm curious. What have you got?
So again, I agree with Kimberly about the fact that, Aaron, the fact that we assume you're male and you're asking about women means that you're aware that you work in an environment that may treat different people differently or maybe have different expectations. So I appreciate that you did that. So I'm going to come at it in terms of like keeping your career on a success track to who are the collaborators in helping you on that. I agree with Kimberly that you need to have an understanding of what does success look like, what does it mean to you. But I'm going to talk about that there's three different possible roles that different people in your life can play in order to help you with your career. And that's a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor. And they're very different. So if you're thinking about having to hone in on a particular skill set or being able to be prepared for a next role, oftentimes an executive coach, like any one of us, could be brought in. And that relationship is relatively short term, could be 6 months, could be a year. And it's going to have a focused goal on a specific development plan and specifically growing certain skill sets. A mentor is somebody that you can select or they can select you, and they normally are in your organization or at least in your industry. They probably are at least a couple of steps ahead of you. And they're people that you can, if you will, brainstorm about different scenarios and situations that are going on. It does require high trust, but they're people that are going to, if you will, give you sort of some guidelines along the way, in this environment, or like I'm working with a company where there's an acquisition happening, and the company that that they had been acquired by is, if you will, passing them on to somebody else. It's a completely different culture, a completely different situation, and so it would be helpful to have people that were mentors that understood the industry and the differences between those companies. And the last one is the sponsor. And this is the one that's very, very, very important, and the one that most people miss in the building of their successful careers, because that's the highest trust relationship. And the sponsor is somebody that's willing to take a stand about you. They're willing to be the one in the room that when your name comes up, builds your brand. Or when they hear about an opportunity, they're the ones who are going to say, hey, if it's appropriate, they'll bring your name up, but if not, they'll inform you about it. And so, because we tend to forget that all the work that we do and the way that we involve in the world of business particularly is a lot through the networks that we build. And so I'm going to encourage you to sort of, the question is, so who is your coach? Who's your mentor? Who's your sponsor? And if you don't have one of any of those, then you need to start creating those and attracting those.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. I think about Erin's idea here having two parts, and I think you've both done it too. One is about is it different for women?
Mhm.
But what is a career track? And as if there's a blueprint, as if we would know what the answer is. And I really reduced it down to something that I think is actually true in both of your ideas. I think which is about a commitment to learning.
Mm.
And I don't know what Aaron needs to learn at any given time in his career. I mean, if I were coaching him, I would learn when I went to coach him. But I want to say that if you as a leader want to think about a success track, what are you going to learn this year?
Mhm.
What's going to be different a year from now about your leadership?
Mhm.
And make it a goal, and then find people who can help you with it. Be assertive about it. Get some money for professional development. I mean, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But a commitment to learning, I think, is really, and if you do it relentlessly throughout your career, 20 years from now, it will be different, but it will still be meaningful. And that's what I would say a career success track looks like.
And adding to that learning piece, Tom, just made me think about something. As I coach leaders at different levels, the higher they get, say to the C-suite, the more they're working through people and with people, and people relationships become so critical. Versus lower down, you're still doing a lot of those horizontal, more task-oriented do things, and more, as you get up, you're thinking more, it's more strategic, it's more visionary, but then you're really having, as a C-suite executive, really representing the culture, leadership, the communication, the people relationship. You're setting the tone for all that, right? So your people skills have to be spot on and very good, right? Your EQ has to be high, your IQ has to be high. Your sense of building a culture of community has to be high. So what I'm going with in this learning piece, if you have not already taken an opportunity to have some kind of behavioral assessment, whether it's DISC, whether it's Myers-Briggs, whether it's the predictive index, whether it's Gallup Strength Finders, you need to know yourself extremely well to know what your strengths are, focus on your strengths, and where you might have some gaps. I don't want to say weaknesses necessarily, because we don't always, it's harder, I think, to improve a weakness than it is to promote a strength and accentuate a strength, and maybe something in between. So I would encourage you to learn about yourself. What are your strengths? What are your triggers? What gives you stress? And, what are some of your when you're stressed, how does that change how you relate to people and communicate to people? Because that's going to be the definition of a really good leader that knows himself, knows how he leads, know what his style is, and also subsequently can learn to know what the people he leads. And so it's not so much the how do you want to be treated that you treat other people, but it's what they call the platinum role in the essence, treat people the way they want to be treated. So I would encourage you, the 360-degree assessment is another great one to understanding how you're being perceived by others. As a leader, potential leader, do they consider you successful material? Kind of like the sponsor that Sonia talked about.
Mhm. So I want to address now the part of, is it different for women? So I'm going to share
Yeah.
2 stories because I find this very interesting. I just finished reading a book that I really recommend to everybody. It's called Through the Glass Ceiling to the Stars. It's a story of Colonel Eileen Collins, who was the first woman to be responsible for a space shuttle, and actually went and connected with the space station, connected with Mir, which was the Russian one. And it's fascinating to read her story. And so here's where I'm going with this. So much of, if it's different for a woman, is the environment in which that person's career is developing. Now, because she became a pilot, she had to go through the Air Force. She was primarily in a male environment, but she didn't distinguish herself out to be, I'm a woman, you got to treat me different. She just figured, what are the rules? How do you play the game? What do you need to do to get ahead? And she did that. She never played her card. She just kept doing what was required. And in some cases, she knew that she was going to have to exceed what potentially other people might think was appropriate. So when other people were like at the bar drinking, she was in the simulator trying, so it was about the discipline and the approach that she took, but she never made it about, so she just figured, what is the environment that I'm navigating? I actually coached another woman in the technology department of an entertainment company. And she had been there like 26 years and had never really had any obstacles to rising in the organization. And I said, really? Why? And she said, because of my boss. All her bosses were women. So they, if you will, cleared the path and made it a very, balanced situation, so that it was about the people that showed the talent, the leadership, the whatever it was that was needed at that time. So you can have, if you will, a career that has very little obstacles that have anything to do with your being a female or not, depending on how it is that you engage in it and you understand it. So I was encouraged to both read that story and to hear from this person, because I thought one has lived a charmed life in the sense that she's been in a career where consistently she didn't have the traditional obstacles that we all know about and we read about. And she was able to succeed, and God bless her. And then the other one lived in an environment where we could say, it doesn't get tougher than being in the military.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And yet, she built a very strong and wonderful career. And she, sometimes we get like some nicknames like she's playing mom because she was being, a caretaker of the team. But she knew that the role that she had signed up for had a lot of danger involved. So she really wanted to make sure that everybody was safe in some way. And in a sense, we sort of traditionally give that to a mom role kind of thing. But anyway, thank you for asking that, because I just wanted to share those 2 stories.
No, and I think that, the environment's changing too. It's not like it was 10 years ago where you had, a lot of the old boy network, if you will. And it was, there potentially were a group of guys that would go out drinking beer, and the women weren't necessarily, if you were one of the few women, if I'm coaching a woman and she's one of the few women that is at that level and she's surrounded by men, they're not always invited, so to speak, to that informal setting, right? But I think a lot of that stuff is dissipated just because of the diversity, the inclusion, the recognition of women on boards. We're getting more women in CEO positions, leadership positions, like you just talked about. So I think it's less about your gender as far as success. It's more about defining your success and knowing what your strengths are and the skill sets that are required for that position, and know what your limitations are on that and working on that. And at the end of the day, if it's truly a fair culture, a psychologically safe and inclusive culture, they'll be rewarding based on the competency for the position, and not so much, I think the gender thing is really not so relevant today as it might have been 5 to 10 years ago.
I want to take exception to that.
It's going to differ.
Yeah, I do, because I find very much it is situational. So I find that
Right, it has to be the right culture in the right place. If it's not, then it can be a factor.
Well, it can be a factor. It can be always a factor. Listen, but I do think gender is a factor. I really do. First off, I don't think just in the world, and well, you two can tell me what you think, but I don't think it's a level playing field for women. I don't think it is. I don't think it is societally. I don't think it is at work. I just don't think it is. But be that as it may, that is the hill. Okay. I was coaching a woman who's new to a team. She finds out she's been brought in at a very senior level. She finds out that she's making $50,000 less a year than her peers. It's a privately held company.
Mm.
And I'm like, what are you going to do? So she goes and she talks to the owner, who basically says, this is a tenure issue. You're new. And we talked about it. And she said, I'll give this a year. But if it's not true, if it's not, but right. So, but she's got her eye on it, that it very much might be unconscious bias. As much as she came to work for this guy, she doesn't think he's a bad guy. But I don't think where gender is being played. I do think people have to be sensitive to it and their antenna out for it. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and women have great intuition and gut. And so in this particular case, your client here, she will know whether it's she's being played or whether it's truly a tenure issue. And I think I think women, I think, have a natural ability to be able to pick up on some of that stuff and trust your gut. If it's not feeling right, you're not in the right place from a thriving culture that's going to support you and your skill sets and where you want to go as a woman.
Well, I want to see something that I think is very relevant about what Tom said. And that was, she accepted the job at the salary that she was offered. And it wasn't until later on when she found out that she was making less than that it became an issue for her. So I think one has to check in with, how do I see, what do I consider my value and my worth? I think today in the world that we're living in, where a lot of people are, as a result, whether it's a result of their COVID experience or not, deciding to change jobs or to change industries, interesting enough, I'm working with a couple of people in certain industries that they realize, so they have a generic skill set, let's say that it's an area that's important to everybody, whether it's IT or, ESG or whatever. And you can work in that role in the pharmaceutical industry, and you can work in that role in the manufacturing industry, and they pay very differently. And one may pay a lot and one may not pay a lot, because to them, that's the value of that role for what it is that they're doing. But I think the thing for the lady that you're coaching is maybe her own perception of what she would command is something she needs to examine as well. I mean, I will share the story. It is true. When I was in the workforce, I did take like a little, there was in between Hewlett Packard and Digital, I accepted a job at a small company because the person who was hiring me had worked with me at HP. I had a high trust in him. And, he said, Sonia, you come over here, you get to do this, and you get to command all the West Coast. And then if you do well, you can take the full country. I mean, so to me, it matched into my goals and my aspirations. The company was privately held, and the people at the top were all male. And I figured that he would be fair with me. He would put together a fair package. I mean, I knew that in sales, you often have to make up the difference in the commission and such. And so I started working there, and within a short period of time, there was all this drama that started unfolding, and I knew I wasn't creating it. And I was trying to figure out the drama with my boss. And I was thinking, how did this happen? Because I knew these people personally before. And I went on a business trip with him, and I finally said, I don't understand why you're being so cold to me. I thought we had a relationship. I came over here because I trusted you, blah, 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 blah. And so he started telling me what the owner had told him. And the owner had said, you better watch out for Sonia because she is so good. She's way better than you. She's going to have your job soon. And I said, excuse me? He said, yeah. And he says, so I just figured you were gunning for my job. I'm like, are you kidding me? So, where normally you would think that kind of stuff happens more on the female side. It was happening. So I came back. I was so upset. I literally came back from our trip. I walked in and sat down with this person. And I said, I want to ask you, I understand that you said some things to my boss and this is what you said. And he said, oh yeah, I was just doing that to stir the pot. He said, but we really hired you because we know you're Hispanic, you're a woman, you know your place. And I remember looking at him and I said, I resign immediately, effective immediately. Thank you very much. And I literally walked to my desk, picked everything up, and I went over to Peter and I said, I'm gone. I will never be here again. He said, what happened? I said, well, I'll let him tell you the story. So I came home. My husband was like, you did what? And I said, you know what? I've lived at that time I thought far too long. This will never happen to me again. But I had misjudged. I had assumed certain things were in place because I had a high trust relationship with this person.
Well, but you trust until it happens.
Right, yeah.
But then you have to have the, if you will,
but Sonia, I mean,
to decide what you're going to do.
Well, and you did with no hesitation. I mean, that's an inspiring story, and I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah,
I really am.
Yeah, how disappointing.
Yeah. On our way out, because we're about to wrap up, I just want to say that I saw a really interesting analogy in a report about executive presence and how it affects women and men and all that. And the observation was that men often are rewarded for being the last man standing in the ring, and women are often rewarded for bringing people into the ring with them. And I heard that and I went, I like that a lot. I mean, I think that can be true in certain places. And it was just helpful. I was like, no, I get that. And it's different. And it goes to the issue that Aaron wrote about are there differences for men and women? So I'm going to say thank you to Aaron. Thanks for your question. We hope you got some tools, some ideas. Listeners, we hope the same thing for you. We hope you get value. If you did, please, you know how to support us. Like us, subscribe, share it, leave us a review. We are on YouTube at Unlocking Leadership-AskTheCoaches.com. And we're wherever you listen to podcasts. If you've got a question for us, really, that's where we would love to hear from you. We would love to help. We are all helpers. Our contact information is in the show notes, or you can always reach out to us at info@unlockingleadership-askthecoaches.com. Join us next time, and we will give you more keys to unlocking leadership. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.